Is $2 million enough to retire in 2025? Well, I asked a Dave Ramsey AI bot to build the perfect retirement plan with $2 million. And then I challenged myself to beat it using just $1 million. Now, I've spent the last 20 years helping people retire early, including myself, twice by the time I was 39. And even those with less than $2 million saved, they were able to be financially free. And so I want to dig in here. I want to kind of talk about this Dave Ramsey advice that we're getting. I know it's kind of vanilla typically, but I thought it'd be kind of fun just to see how he would respond to these different questions that we posed to him. Hey Dave, answer this in 30 seconds or less. It's 2025, I'm 65 years old, I have $2 million in my Roth IRA. If I only take out 4% a year, how much will I be making in 20 years adjusting for inflation?
All right, listen up. If you're 65 now, pulling 4% a year from that $2 million Roth IRA, that's $80,000 a year tax-free. Now, adjust for 3% inflation over 20 years, that $80,000 will feel like about $44,000 in today's dollars. That's a payout with every candle on your birthday cake.
Okay, so here's a few things, right? One, he talked about inflation being 3% a year. That's kind of like the vanilla answer they'll give. But if you go to something like shadowstats.com, where that guy literally had to deal with inflation changing with the Carter administration, where they changed the numbers on everybody, and now all of a sudden the numbers didn't work out, you'll start to realize the government's been manipulating those numbers for a while. Why? Because they're trying to make Social Security last longer, right? So he's showing shadow stats, it's like 6 or 7% more whenever they claim. All right, using that same $2 million that we're pulling out 4% a year, what if inflation was adjusted at 8% a year? How much would I have in 20 years?
Oh boy, 8% inflation? That's not a gentle breeze, that's a financial hurricane. If inflation stays that high for 20 years, your money's purchasing power gets annihilated. That $80,000 will feel like about $16,600 in today's dollars.
So Dave, answer this in 30 seconds or less. Assuming 8% inflation, assuming I have $2 million in my Roth IRA and I'm pulling out 4% a year, how can I keep that $80,000 a year lifestyle with that 8% inflation rate?
To keep that $80,000 lifestyle with 8% inflation, your investments better be working harder than you ever did. That means your Roth IRA needs to grow at 12% plus per year, because 8% is just keeping you even. You need 4% on top of that just to sustain withdrawals. So how do you do it? Invest in growth stock mutual funds. Spread across growth, aggressive growth, international, and growth and income. Stay out of bonds, gold, crypto, or anything that smells like fear. You cannot afford to get cute or conservative. The tortoise doesn't win this race. The tortoise gets crushed by inflation. Stay invested, stay aggressive, or get broke. Your choice.
This leads to the next problem, right? What happens if we have a stock market recession or a crash, right? What happens if that occurs along the way? Okay, Dave, answer this in 30 seconds or less. Assume we have $2 million in a Roth IRA and assume inflation is 8%. If the stock market in year 5 decides to tank, decides to drop by 30%, and then go back up to its 8% average return, how long will my money last if I pull out 4% a year or $80,000 a year?
All right, buckle up. This is a retirement stress test, and most folks flunk it. You start with $2 million pulling $80,000 a year. Then, boom, year 5 hits, market drops 30%. That takes your nest egg down to around $1.3 million, not counting withdrawals. And you're still yanking out $80,000 like nothing happened. That's like tossing water out of a sinking boat with a spoon. Even if the market rebounds to 8% average return after that crash, the damage from that early hit, what we call sequence of returns risk, means your portfolio could run dry in 17 to 20 years, maybe sooner if inflation eats faster. Translation, you better build margin into your plan. Keep a 1 to 2 year cash buffer, stay aggressively invested, and cut spending if the market drops. Don't ride into a bear market with a blindfold and a spending habit. You don't retire on averages. You retire on actual returns.
Amen. You do retire on actual returns. That's the problem. That's only one down year. And 30% is a big down year, granted, right? But we did have that in 2022. 23% loss in 2022. We saw that. We're 2025. We're starting to see another one. Here's the thing. If I say year 5, year 10, year 12, maybe year 19, it's even worse when it's right before you retire. If I were to keep playing this out, you already know what's happening. You're going to run out of cash, right? And so you have to pretend, of course, now we're still pulling out $80,000 a year. We're not even factoring for inflation. We're not pulling out more due to inflation. We're just getting crushed by inflation while we watch our money work less and less. Does this sound more like what you might have seen your parents or grandparents experience maybe? We talked about 4% a year pulling that out, but at age 65, they don't recommend 4% a year anymore. That was from numbers that ended in 1974. These are old hat numbers. The numbers for age 65 is 3% a year. It's about 3.3% a year. So if you have $2 million, they're saying you should only be pulling out roughly about $65,000 a year. That's it. So what's my plan? My plan is avoid the stock market. Get away from that crazy ex-girlfriend that's bipolar, that is she's sexy, but way too crazy to be able to deal with on a day-to-day basis. As they say in Yellowstone,
I don't have the energy for you today.
Same thing with the stock market. I don't have the time and energy for that kind of crap, and I was a stock trader. But again, I have stock traders come to us all the time saying, I need passive income. I hate having to trade my own stocks. And mutual funds, they know is not a good investment because they don't work. By the way, his advice was go into mutual funds, trying to go all in on stocks. But if the stock market drops, what happens? You run out of money faster. So of course you're left with this dilemma. Do I go conservative and keep my money, or do I go aggressive but then I lose my money? Or do I do a blend? And the problem is you do the blend, you can still lose money, right? That's the issue. What's my answer? Because I mentioned talking about having $1 million only, and what could I actually be doing? We're talking about not even 80,000 a year, 65,000 a year with $2 million. What if I had $1 million? What could we do? I'll tell you what we did. We did with Dan Markert, who's one of our old clients who, sadly enough, we've talked about on this channel before, and we even had on 2 of our podcasts. If you haven't checked out our podcast, the Money Ripples podcast, do so by subscribing to this channel. But we had him on our podcast. He, just so you know, he was about 60 years old, retired from the military with $1 million. And when his financial advisor says, well, with 3% a year, you can pull off $30,000 a year, he said, screw that. I got to find another answer.
Hey, am I really ready to retire? And the answer was no, because when I looked at hey, I've been pretty traditional, low cost, mutual funds, index, big savers, came clear to me that was not enough.
He started searching, finding alternative investment podcasts, eventually heard me on an interview, followed our Money Ripples podcast. He reached out, became one of our VIP clients. He says, all right, let's find ways to diversify. So we did. We diversified his $1 million. He bought a couple of duplexes that were managed by somebody else. He also went and invested in multifamily complexes and in some oil and gas. And guess what? His $1 million made him over $100,000 a year of actual income without touching his $1 million.
I mean, now my passive income cash flow is over $13,000 a month.
So that $1 million he still has. He still has a golden goose laying golden eggs, but instead of living on, in his case, $30,000 a year, it's now over $100,000 a year. And again, that's with less money, half the money. Remember, Dave said, hey, you're $2 million. If you pull out this much, $80,000 a year, but then you might go broke if the market goes down even 1 year, right? And we're saying, no, because of that, you should only be pulling out $65,000 a year, if that. And that's hoping that it'll last long enough before you die. Now, the good question is does Dave Ramsey, what does he think about real estate? Hey, Dave, answer this in 30 seconds or less. Say that I take $1 million and I invest it in real estate that generates passive income of $100,000 a year profit. Assume that I bought $5 million of real estate that appreciates at 4% a year, and my rents that are grossing me about $200,000 a year appreciates by 4% a year as well. After 20 years, how much assets and how much passive income would I have?
All right, you leveraged up $1 million into $5 million of real estate.
Now, why did I say that? Because assume you put a 20% down on these properties, $1 million buys you $5 million of real estate. That's why I said that.
You're playing with a big bat now, so don't strike out.
All right, I'm a big boy.
Let's run it fast. $5 million appreciating at 4% annually for 20 years. That's about $10.96 million in property value. Rents starting at $200,000 per year, growing 4% annually.
And I did the gross, not counting the property management fees and the money coming out for other stuff, for the mortgage payment.
In 20 years, you're pulling in about $438,000 per year gross rent. If your $100,000 net profit scales the same way, you're looking at about $219,000 per year in passive income, assuming expenses stay proportional. So, assets equals approximately $11 million, passive income equals approximately $219,000 per year. But here's the warning, genius.
Yeah, you better call me a genius.
This works only if you manage the debt well, keep your properties full, and don't play landlord roulette. Don't get cocky with leverage. Debt is a tool, not a lifestyle. One bad downturn and your empire turns into a foreclosure tour.
So Dave, answer this in 30 seconds or less. Are you saying this scenario with the real estate properties earning $219,000 a year with $11 million of assets is better than almost running out of money from a Roth IRA?
Yes. If you run it smart, this real estate scenario can smoke the Roth IRA strategy over 20 years. Here's why. Roth IRA equals decumulation. You're spending down a pile of money. Real estate equals income producing, appreciating asset. You're building wealth and cash flow. $219,000 per year coming in, $11 million in appreciating assets. That beats scraping $80,000 a year from a shrinking IRA while inflation punches you in the face. And this is a Dave-sized but. Real estate takes work, risk, and wisdom. You screw it up with debt, vacancies, or bad tenants, game over. So yeah, it can be better, but only if you're not a dingbat.
Thank you, Dave. I don't want to be a dingbat. So here's the thing. He is right. You got to do it the right way. Now, he's talking about doing it on your own. I was talking about having a property manager. What if we had property managers doing it for us, right? What if that's the case? That's better. right? So again, like you want to make sure you're doing it right. You do have a good property manager. That's 100% true. Now, we may not be buying a lot of real estate right now. You could be buying real estate and it could be good, but what if it doesn't cash flow that much? What if it cash flows less? What if you were to instead just be a lender of your money? That $1 million, you lend it and even earn 1% a month, that's 12% a year, is $10,000 a month. That's $120,000 a year that your $1 million is making. Still better than that $80,000 or $65,000 or whatever you might say it is. Also, if you're trying to battle inflation, that's the best way to battle inflation. Here's the last question for Dave that we should be asking. And in fact, everybody should be asking to wrap this up. Hey, Dave, answer this in 20 seconds or less. Where do you have most of your assets?
I've got my money where my mouth is, mostly in paid for real estate and mutual funds. No debt, no gimmicks, no crypto nonsense, just boring, consistent wealth building machines. Because wealth isn't flashy, it's focused.
Well, here's one thing I'll tell you. If you look up Dave Ramsey, he's worth arguably about $200 million. About $52 million of that is the business worth. $150 million of that is real estate. Nowhere does it ever mention how much he has in mutual funds. I'm not saying he doesn't have mutual funds, but I can guarantee you that all his money is made in his business and in real estate. He doesn't even need the mutual funds. But he's teaching you, who all you have are your mutual funds, telling you to go that route. Do what Dave does, where we know all of his money is pretty much in business and real estate. Very little is ever reliant upon mutual funds. Even Susie Orman. I remember we looked it up several years ago. Where does Susie Orman invest her money? Did you know only 5% of her money's in stocks? And she's telling people to invest in the stock market, but 5% was there. Mostly it was real estate and bonds. That's where she was holding her cash, not in stocks. So just be aware when you hear this stuff, put your money where your mouth is. The thing is, that's what AI Dave says. But the truth is, when you look up his real statistics, and I was trying to look to see how much mutual funds he had, there was no mention about how much mutual funds investments he had. It was all real estate, business. Beware who you listen to. Put your money where your mouth is, Dave, right? Or your AI mouth is, wherever that is on this thing. But regardless, put your money where the mouth is. Do what works. Do what creates cash flow. Now, what's worked for me and many, many of our clients, hundreds of our clients, creating much more passive income and cash flow than his own followers. In fact, his followers who are poster children, guess where they come? When they find us, they come to us. They say, hey, I've got great net worth, but that net worth is worthless without passive income and cash flow. What do I do? Like, I'm debt free, I've got savings, what do I do with it? That's where you talk about creating passive income now. You want to learn how to do that? Go to our website, moneyripples.com. There's a passive income calculator you can check out today to find out how much passive income you could create in the next 12 months legitimately, not in 20 or 40 years, but right now. Check that out today.